To kick off our boot camp, Sam Jeanblanc is the market lead of Google Philippines, and with, without him, we wouldn't be made a Google for Startups partner. Google for Startups is a network of accelerators all over the world, and we share best practices on how to really take care of our startup. He's gonna talk to you about how important the culture is in your company. So put your hands together for Sam Jean Blanc. Sam, take it away.
Hi everyone. Wait, where is my video? There you go. Okay, I need to do a few checks. Can everyone see my face? And my beautiful
Not
living.
yet. Not yet, sorry.
Not yet.
There we go.
Yes? Okay, great.
Yes.
And second question. Can everybody see my screen in a second?
Yes.
Yes? All right, fantastic. All right, cool. Thank you everyone. I'm really sorry I had to cut Miss Diane in her fantastic presentation, but I have another meeting actually with a startup right after. So I unfortunately couldn't wait any longer, but I hope that Diane can finish her presentation after this session because I think she has a lot of inspiring stories to share. And it's been just a pleasure working with her and the entire team for the past 2 years now. So it's been a fantastic journey. Okay, now I want this to be an interactive presentation, of course. So if you can ask questions, please use the chat. I think Alex can write them down, and then we can make regular breaks, and I'll just open it up for any questions you might have. But I'll start with a short introduction of myself. So I've been in Google for 6 years, and I've been in the Philippines for 3 years. I would say that the past 3 years have been some of the happiest of my life, both in terms of career and personally. And a big part of it has been, every single Filipinos that I've met. I landed in the country in Naya, and I knew the first time I set foot outside of the airport that I was in a very special place. I like this picture that you can see on the screen right now because it's one of the many stories of meeting fantastic people across the Philippines. This was taken in Mualboal, which is south of Cebu. For those who don't know, it's known for the sardine runs. It's also known for the mangoes. And so I was riding around with a motorbike, and I saw the mangoes by the side of the street, decided to stop. And the lady in red there was selling those mangoes. She was alone. But when she saw me, she called her niece and her daughter and her cousins and her neighbors and her aunts and her uncle. And all of a sudden, there was this entire family that was there with me. And instead of just spending 5 minutes eating the mangoes, I actually spent 2 hours with them. We went and watched GMA inside their house, and they invited me for dinner. And after a while, I had to say, okay, guys, I really need to go because I was planning on actually seeing the waterfalls right next to their house. So this is just one of the many stories that I've had in the Philippines, and that's what has made my stay here so nice and so enjoyable. So thank you so much for your hospitality. I also got to meet some fantastic people. I usually ask, who is this person in the picture? But I realized actually that the name is written in the back there. I didn't realize that the name was on the door. So, it's not actually a quiz anymore. And then, of course, things have been, slightly different since for the past 3 months. And so, 2 messages here. One is, this culture presentation is even more important now because, when you deal with your employees and when you deal with your startup and everybody is working remotely, your culture is actually more important than ever. And so companies that have poor cultures end up with employees that are disconnected, feel less motivated. And companies that have very, very strong cultures actually can benefit from this situation and keep their employees motivated, keep their employees connected. And I actually have heard of both sides of the stories. I think Google has a very strong culture, and we've seen this in the past 3 months. I've heard of friends that are in other big companies and telling me that the culture is just falling apart. So I think the culture is of your company, of your startup, is more important than ever. So this is one of the TGIFs that we do with my team every Friday. And this is me having to work out in the stairs of my condo because, we can't go out anymore. And so we adapt, we changed. And then I've had some, great sharings with other managers and directors from other countries. This is one of my colleagues in Japan, where he set up his entire his entire room based on his passion for biking. So a lot of innovation, not just in terms of products, but also in terms of how employees are dealing with their day to day. So today we're going to talk about the culture of Google, but the most important thing here definitely is what are the key learnings that you can take out of this, because Google is now a very big company, but how are the things that you can learn from the way we've built our culture and then incorporate this into your own startup. By the way, there's this fantastic kind of series of interviews by, I think it's Business World in the Philippines, where they interview startup founders and they ask them how they're dealing with the pandemic. And I think the latest one they've done was with Roland Ross, who's the founder of Kumu. And the interview is very, very nice. I think Roland is a fantastic founder. And he shares how, for example, he treats his flat as different areas of Manila. And so he commutes to work even inside his own flat. I would really encourage you guys to read it. It's a great way of understanding how a succeeding startup actually has a very strong culture at the core. So what he does, for example, is he says, okay, my room is Makati, where his condo is located. And then my living room is QC, where my office is located. And so every time he opens the door and moves from one room to the next, it's like commuting. And so, for example, he doesn't work in his room because that's his Makati condo, but he only works in the living room because that's QC, etc. So I would encourage you to read this interview. All right, so let's go through the agenda. The first one is, of course, how can you guys build your startup mission? Then we'll go through the 4 key reasons or the 4 key attributes of Google's culture. And then finally, of course, plenty of time for questions at the end. So write them down in the chat. I'll make regular pauses, and then we'll open it up for live questions also at the end of the presentation. Sounds good? All right, fantastic. So the first and most, there's a noise in the background. I don't know if this is coming from me or is this from you, Alex? There's this little ding dong.
That's the participants coming in, actually.
Okay. All right, if you want to mute, I don't know if it's, if you want to mute yourself, cool. Okay, so first part is building a mission. And, you won't believe it, but actually building a mission is probably one of the most important things you can do at the start of your startup journey. So, building a mission is particularly important, and thinking of your mission from the start is very important because as your startup will grow, you will see that your company changes. However, if your mission is strong from the start and very clear, it doesn't matter how, what scale you have, the mission will still stay true, whatever the size of your company. And to give you an idea, Google has grown 5x from 2009 when we were 20,000 to 2019. Last year we were 100,000. This year, pre-COVID, we're planning on, being 120,000. So we've really scaled in terms of company, but the mission has always stayed the same. And that's why it's very important, because you'll see when you're building your startup, well, you first start with maybe a few founders and a few employees, and then you grow to 100 people, right? And then all of a sudden, the mission that was kind of just oral becomes more important than ever, because your employees are going to be distributed across multiple offices. Not everybody is going to know each other. You may be on 2 separate floors, and therefore making sure that everybody understand what the startup is trying to do is going to be absolutely critical. At Google, we often say when we open a new office, for example, we've opened the Philippines office 6 years ago, there are a bunch of key milestones. The first milestone is when you go from knowing everybody around the table. So let's say you take the entire office for dinner, and you'll be able to call out if there's somebody missing, because everybody knows each other, and they know if someone is sick or someone can't attend. And then you get to a size where, well, not everybody knows each other, And therefore, well, you make this big dinner and you don't notice if someone is missing just because you cannot know 200 people, for example. The second key milestone is moving to different floors. So when everybody's on the same floor, well, you always bump into each other and it's easy to collaborate. When you're on two different floors on a building, some things don't happen anymore. For example, mingling, for example, um, just having a coffee chat in the hallway. And therefore, this has a big impact on the culture. So think clearly about the mission, because as your company scales, even those small milestones, going from 2 to 10, going from 10 to 100, actually means a lot in terms of company culture. And the mission really stands at the top of what a startup or what a company should do, right? The mission is what trickles down. It's really this top-down vision that trickles down into all of the things that the company will do. And an easy way to know if your mission is good and if people know your mission is just asking your employee, do you know what Google is doing? Do you know Google's mission? Do you know what our startup is trying to achieve? And that mission has to be very clear amongst everyone and also very easy to remember and understand. So the question is, what is Google's mission? And I'm going to let you, you have 30 seconds, if anyone knows, to type it in the chat. Of course, extra bonus for people that don't Google. What is Google's mission? Do no evil. Okay, thanks, Gabby. That's actually not the mission, but it was part of our core principles. That is correct. We've taken it out. Organize the world's information and make it universally. Okay, that's fantastic, right? I don't know if you guys Googled it. If not, if yes, it's fine. Organized info, great. Thank you, G-Boy. The do no evil, Gabriel, it was part of our core principles. We've taken it out because evil is very subjective. And what we realized is, different cultures may see evil as, a different thing or a different entity or a different meaning. And therefore it was so subjective that it was just too ambiguous. So we've taken it out, but it's still part of course, our core principles. Make information easy, accessible to everyone. All right, fantastic. June, Yana, all great. Yeah, the real answer is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. Mina, well done. This is exactly Google's mission. And that mission, by the way, was created in 1998. So it hasn't changed in 22 years that Google has existed. It was the very core mission that started Google. And it's fantastic to know that we've grown from 2 to 100,000 and the mission has stayed the same. So it means that the founders at the start, just like you guys as you're creating your startup, the founders of Google had this fantastic vision and they've stick to it from the very start. And the second thing that you must note is when Google went public in 2004, they had this, of course, documents that they filed to the NASDAQ and to Wall Street. And they've really highlighted another core part of Google is that Google doesn't want to be a conventional company. And so whatever our scale, we will always try to be different, to have our values and just to stick to them. And I think that has been pretty true since 2004. We're still not a conventional company. We're still very, very different from probably all the companies out there. And we really try to keep on innovating in our culture, in the way we do things. And I'm going to share a lot more examples later on. So, important thing to know about Google, just like you guys probably are starting in your apartment in QC or over Manila or over Cebu, Google started in a garage. So Google was no different than your startups at the very start. And so if you bring this to today, it means that probably your startups in 20 years could be just as big as Google. So the sky is really the limit. But Google started in that little garage there. And this is what Google looked like at the very start. 2 geeks in a garage surrounded by basketball balls and old computer screens and old furniture in the back. And Google was running on this very machine right there, on this very hard drive. And that was the first version of Google. So this is Larry Page and this is Sergey Brin, our 2 founders. So one key message here for you guys in the call is document as much as possible the start of your company. If it fails, well, it will be a great memory and a great learning. I think Diane mentioned the importance of being able to learn from failures. If it succeeds, then you want to make sure that you document that path to success, so that the spirit of the start of your company remains even as you grow and become much bigger. So try to document as much as possible your early days. It's also a great way to reflect on your path, your journey, and probably also learn from things that you didn't do well at the start that you can improve as you grow. This is kind of the next generation of Google. We went from one server to a bunch of servers, in a rented space, and that was the first version of Google. Now, one thing to note here is that this page, 22 years ago, and this page, okay, so this is the search engine. If you compare this with this, what do you notice? It's almost the same. Yep. A very small difference. Absolutely. It's hardly changed. And the reason why it's hardly changed is because at the very, very core of Google has always been a great user experience. Google has won or has done well in the search space because of a great user experience. If you compare it with Alta Vista or Alta Vista, Yahoo at the time, they didn't really have a search engine as simple as what Google was. They had this kind of repertory where you had plenty of different sections where you could navigate to. The user experience was actually pretty poor, but Google always focused on the great user experience. So that's maybe the second learning of this call is make sure you make your product as user friendly as possible. I was checking some of your websites, checking some of your startups before this call, and you really have to make sure that it's so simple, so enjoyable for users to use your service that they're going to just come back and use it over and over again. Think of Google, think of Facebook, think of Airbnb, think of all those great startups. They always have a fantastic user experience at the very core. I have a video there. I'm going to skip it because it doesn't play well on Zoom, but you can definitely watch it after this session. So the way Google has organized the company, right? So first we had the mission. Second, we focused on the user experience. Third, we organized the company in a different way than other companies do, right? So we've actually have 3 sections inside Google, 3 not silos, but 3 orgs, 3 organizations, and they've been the same since the very start. The first one is engineering. Google, as its core, is a technology company, right? We innovate in terms of technology. A new search engine, a new maps engine, and so engineering is 50% of Google's workforce. The principle at Google is when you hire someone in those 2 other areas, you also hire an engineer, so that there's always at least 50% engineers inside the company. And that's important because if the core of what you do, the value you create is creating fantastic new technology products, then you want to make sure that your org and your employee ratio represents this as well. So engineering, 50% of Google's workforce. Then you have Google Global Business Organization. This is where I am. We drive partnerships, we drive revenue, we drive advertising, we drive YouTube Premium, YouTube Plus, whatever you want. We drive all of the business side of Google. So I stand there, and then finally you have, of course, finance, PR, legal, all of those administrative and kind of general roles, and they sit in a separate entity as well. So this is probably only HR is also there. 5 to 10% of Google. This is 40. Okay, 10%, 40%, 50%. Right. So make sure you think about those ratios as well. And in many companies, what happens is at first you have a bunch of geeks that create a great product, and then they want to scale it. So they hire a lot of salespeople. And so they end up in this scenario where their company is skewed. You have 80% of people that are not engineers, but the very core of your product is actually engineering. So you want to make sure and you think about the way you hire and the amount of employees in different functions. You want to mirror what you're trying to achieve. If you're all about sales, let's say SAP, then okay, you can have 80% of salespeople. But if you just want to keep that innovation DNA, you want to make sure you have a lot of engineers. And the Google ratio is 50% engineers. Now, the culture is really important because it's what brings those three silos together. Actually, I don't have a lot of interaction with my engineering colleagues. They do product management, they code in the back end. I meet some other leaders every now and then, but I'm not always in touch with them. The one thing that brings us together and that doesn't make us, strangers inside Google is the common culture that we share. And that's why culture is just so important. It's that mission that everybody knows about and everybody is working towards. I'm bringing in partnerships and advertising revenue for Google so that I can allow engineers to change the world. And I'm doing this because I think we adhere to the same value and we have the same culture. So culture is really important to bring those three entities together. So I'll take a small break there and I'll take maybe a few questions if you have any, and then I'll go in through the 4 principles of Google's culture.
Does anyone have questions? Please leave it on the chat and then.
Yeah, chat, unmute yourself, whatever works for you. Thanks, Butch. All right, that's not a question, that's a compliment. All right, perfect. Take your time, think about questions as we go along, write them down, and then we can. How often can you change your culture? All right, I'll just take this one then. Okay, fantastic. How often can you change your culture? That's a good one. I think culture needs or eats stability. You want to have a culture that is kind of timeless because it takes time for people to adapt to it and to adhere to those values. So if you change it all the time, you're actually not bringing stability and clarity to your employees. So I think it's really, really important that we keep that in place. Big changes in culture can create a lot of upheaval, and especially for old-time employees, seeing something that they've grown in change can be kind of a shock. So my guess would be, have values at the very start. That's why you have to think about the culture now as you're creating your company, because you want some kind of stability. However, of course, you want to be flexible and adapt to change. And I'll give you 2 examples. When Global Business Organization, what we call GBO, was created, that's the organization I'm in inside Google. We used to go, I think it was once every 2 years or once every year, to Las Vegas for this big sales kickoff that almost every company that has a sales team kind of does. And then one day, I think it was 2014, it was announced that it was canceled. And so we had already planned, we had our plane tickets booked by the company, we had our hotel rooms, people had done all those crazy travel plans, but it got canceled. And that was actually a big part of our culture because it got all the GBO people together from all across the world. And it was a great time to mingle. I think like Bruno Mars was singing, like all those crazy stuff. That doesn't matter. What was important is to bring everybody together from all across the world. When that was canceled, it was a big shock. And some people left, some people complained, some people were very disappointed. Some people also understood why the decision was made. It wasn't very well communicated. And I think this is a space where Google learned, actually sales leader learned a lot, and they didn't replicate that mistake, which was, it was an abrupt change. It wasn't well explained, and it was something that people really cared about. So that was kind of a miss on our end. And then recently, Google has changed what we call TGIF. So TGIF has been a tradition at Google, a very big part of the culture. Every Friday, anyone in the company could ask questions to the founder. And so recently it's been tweaked. It's been changed, especially the way we can ask questions. It used to be that you had a Dory and you can ask any question. You can also ask questions live. And they've decided to take out the live portion and moderate the Dory questions a lot more. And it was actually very well explained. The reason is it ended up that it was always the same people asking the same questions. And also a lot of the questions were US centric. it was a tax change, it was a political question, it was, you know, whatever you want. And you know, that would impact employees, or, you know, benefits, whatever you want to call it. And so people around the world were complaining that the questions were sometimes a bit too US centric. And therefore, you know, the company decided to change the way we do TGIF and have you know, more questions from around the world, more questions that were upvoted. And so that was a culture change as well, because TGIF was a big part of Google. However, it was a positive one because I think it made sense, and it was, you know, acting on the feedback that Googlers were giving. So, you know, to your question, how often do you change culture? I think the culture should be stable and very clear. However, you should be nimble. If you feel that something is not working anymore, you should change it. But when you do, make sure you explain it very well and almost over communicate on that change to make sure that everybody inside the company understands why you're doing it. So great question. All right. Oh, fantastic. Yo, a huge list of questions. Went from 0 to too many. So let's take a break. Thank you for the questions. Alex, if you can just write them down. I'll go through the first part of our pillars, and then we can take a few more.
Okay.
All right. So the 4 key pillars of Google's culture. You can read them on the screen there, and they're all very important. And I'm going to go through them one by one. Now, of course, you can see that the first one has to be tweaked. This presentation, of course, was created before COVID-19. And so there are a lot of changes in the way Google is thinking about the workplace at this very moment. But I think the principles are still correct. And it's possible that, you know, we should go back eventually to working together in the same place with a few changes, but I think those principles will still hold right. So the first one is the workplace. So, you know, Google was at the very beginning became very well known because of the fantastic work environment that it was giving its employees. And the thinking behind this was, hey, you know, if you give employees a fantastic space to where they can be well, where they can enjoy being in, not only are they going to feel valued, right? But they're also going to feel that you know they're going to give the company probably a little more than if you go into this dark gray space that you actually don't enjoy working in. And so that was the thinking from the very start. How can we reward our employees? How can we make them feel that they're valued? And at the same time, they would probably give us a lot more in return. The second reason why workplace was so important was Google was created by 2 students, Larry and Sergey. They were studying in Stanford. They dropped out of their diploma, and they created Google. And so they always had that kind of, you know, American campus kind of culture where everything is fun, where, you know, it's you know, you don't take yourself seriously. You come in shorts and flip-flops. And so they kind of brought the American campus culture into the workplace. And that was kind of a first. It wasn't thought of before. And that what's made it so special. Nowadays, you go to Unilever, you go to any big company, you will see fantastic offices. And so you may feel that this is kind of normal. But believe me, 10 years ago, having such a wonderful workplace was definitely not common. And so Google was kind of the first mover on that space. And it's been adopted by many other companies since then. Here are a few pictures of our workspace. So, of course, when you're a startup, you want to be, you know, watchful of your funds. But there are some, you know, simple things you can put in place. You know, one of them is, for example, bringing your bike to work. Why should it be not allowed to just bring your bike up and store it in some kind of storage room or in the hallway? Right. That's the photo on the bottom left. Pool tables, slides, you know, fancy chairs. You know, buying a boring chair versus buying a standing chair that you have on the bottom right, you know, the cost is not very different. However, employees will value it very much. In our office in Piccadilly, so in BGC, we have a climbing wall. You know, so Google kind of, you know, went all over the place and started doing a lot of super cool innovations. But all of this was like, okay, you guys come, you guys give us, you know, 8 hours at least of your time as employees. Let us also reward you. Let us give you places where you can have fun and decompress when you want to do that. It all came from this key finding that if you give employees regular breaks, you know, to just take their mind out of their work, and think about something else like exercising, taking a rest, etc., they will actually come back a lot more productive. So the learning from your startup is, don't overstress your employees. If they're working for 12 hours straight, that's probably not good, because after a while, the productivity on their work is going to be a lot less. So make sure that you give them ample time to relax, to take breaks. Of course, they should be driven, so you should still give them objective that they have to achieve. But I think most companies, they're afraid to give their employees breaks and time to breathe, because they don't trust them. And so key part of Google's culture is all about trust in your employees. I trust you. I trust that if I give you a pool table or if I give you a PlayStation, you're not going to spend your entire day playing. You're actually going to spend maybe half an hour playing, and then the rest of your time you're going to be working and you're going to be efficient. And the way to make sure that trust is never broken is to make sure you give very clear objectives to your employees, what we call OKRs, objective key results, right? The objective of the OKR is to make sure that, hey, you can spend your day however you want. You can climb for 10 hours, but as long as you reach your objectives, that's cool. If you start not reaching your OKRs anymore, then that's not cool anymore. And therefore, we have to have a productivity discussion. So make sure trust is important, but also driving your employees through very clear objectives. On the right hand here, you have a sleeping pod that are commonplace inside Google. Same finding there. If your employees need a break and need to take some rest, rather than forcing them to work at their desk, it's actually good to allow them to get a break. All right, I'm going to skip that part. The thinking there is, and I think that's an important one for startups. Painting a wall white, so a boring normal environment, versus painting it with colors, it's actually the same price. So it doesn't have to be expensive to have a cool environment. And actually, when you go to the idea space, location, well, it's a normal business and office that you would find in many places in Makati, but it's the way you decorate it, it's the ambience you create inside this workspace that makes it so special and so enjoyable. Buying an office chair, gray, boring, versus buying a more fancy chair, it's probably the same price or very close to it. However, it's going to make a lot of difference for employees. They're going to enjoy it a lot more. They're going to have more place to relax. So think of it, it's not more expensive to make your office be fancy. Other pictures of the Google office, football, the slide. We do have a slide in our Piccadilly office as well. I think this is, if I'm not mistaken, this is in LA somehow. So, the surfboards are related to the surf you can do near LA. And on the left side here, you have what we call micro kitchens. Micro kitchens are places on each floor where employees can get free food. So the finding there was, if your employee is hungry, so, their stomach is telling them, go get a break, go get a muffin somewhere. If you don't allow them to go get a muffin, then their productivity is going to tank. The second learning is, if you allow them to go get a muffin, it's probably going to take them half an hour, maybe 45 minutes to go down the elevator, go to the nearest bake shop, buy the muffin, come back up. This is probably going to take half an hour, 45 minutes. And so you're probably not maximizing also their productivity there. So if you give them available food, less than 3 minutes or 5 minutes walk from their desk, then they're not going to be hungry. So they're always going to be at their best. And second, they're not going to spend all that time going around the city and buying food. So these were the two learnings around creating micro kitchen and giving free food and free drinks to your employees. Another principle is, you don't have to wear a suit to be taken seriously. I feel that nowadays this is widely acceptable, maybe not in the more traditional companies. Probably in the Philippines, some traditional corporations would like you to come in a special attire. But I think it's widely accepted now that, you can come however you want. It's not how you look that makes your work great. It's actually what you do. No suits, coming in shorts, coming in flip-flops. I remember I got fined by my building in Net Park in BGC because I came in shorts. I think it was the end of a weekend. It was a Sunday night. I was trying to go to the office to, grab my laptop or something. And I was coming back from a trip and I was in shorts, and the building officer fined me. So he wrote this notice that said, oh, this person came in shorts and he has to be fined, I don't remember, 500 pesos. So I complained to my head of building management. I was like, he fined me 500. And he said, no, we have this agreement where Googlers can come in the way they want. But it's really, really important that you allow your employees to just be themselves and just, wear whatever is most comfortable to them. If what's comfortable to them is wearing a shirt and a suit, that's also fine, right? But if they prefer wearing, shorts and flip-flops, that's also okay. All right, so that was for the workplace environment. The second key part of Google's culture is what we call moonshots. Moonshots are how can you think 20x or 10x about your product versus trying to improve it all the time slightly. So a little quiz here. This is the market share of a company, right? That was at one point praised as one of the most innovative companies in the world, and ended up in a matter of a few years completely collapsing and eventually going bankrupt. Can anybody guess who this company is? Nokia. Wow. Nokia, Friendster, Yahoo, Blockbuster, Nokia. All right. It's not some of them. No, it's not Yahoo. I wouldn't. Oh my God. Mark. Lapid Parcel. Very, very nice. Yes, this is the market share of Blackberry. Maybe some of you in this call are just too young. The year iPhone launched. iPhone launched in 27. So actually Blackberry had a good run even after the iPhone, but they just didn't anticipate the rise of the touchscreen. So for those that are not too young to remember what a Blackberry was, this was the ultimate business person smart accessory. If you had a Blackberry, you were cool, you were in. You could access the internet, you could send emails. That was the coolest phone on the planet. Nobody today, has a Blackberry in their pocket. So the importance of moonshots is if you're only creating incremental innovation, if you're not completely rethinking your product regularly, this is what could happen to your sales. It's such a great story. I mean, if you don't know the Blackberry story, just look it up. They stuck with this keyboard there, and that's not the most important one. People actually love the keyboard, but they never made this one become a touchscreen. And when they did, it was too late, and they were losing it to especially the iPhone. So how to not become Blackberry? The first principle is do things that seem crazy on paper. Coming up with a touchscreen smartphone like the iPhone in 27, that was crazy, right? Nokia didn't believe in it. Microsoft didn't believe in it. And that's why they never actually took off in terms of smartphones, right? You have to think about the crazy stuff. You have to think about how can I fundamentally change an industry or change a vertical. The reason behind this is the speed of change. If you feel that change is overwhelming at this moment, brace yourself, because this is the future is going to just be acceleration. So if you're not constantly putting your product back into question, then eventually someone is going to come up with a more innovative product and eventually take you over. It's the same. It also applies to Google, by the way, but you have to create a culture where people are constantly innovating so that, hopefully you don't get through this crisis. This is the same picture taken 8 years apart. It's the Pope speaking in the Vatican. 25, no smartphones, right? Probably this guy only has a Blackberry there. No iPhone. 2013, everybody has a touchscreen smartphone. This is how fast in 8 years a picture can change and the device can change the world. So the idea behind moonshots is always think 10x, never think 10%. If you're always thinking, how can I make my product 10% better? Eventually somebody is going to revolutionize your world and come up with something 10 times better, and your industry is going to be in trouble. So always think, how can I make this 10 times better? How can I fundamentally change this service for people? And if you think about Google search, that's what it was, right? How can you make the web accessible for everyone? That was 10x thinking. And it's been inside Google for the very start. How do you think about moonshots? The first thing you have to think of is the size of the problem. It has to be a huge problem to solve. Right? If you're solving for niches, it works, but it's not going to be, of course, a moonshot. It's still, interesting to look at as a startup, but the moonshot thinking is it has to be a massive problem. There needs to be some kind of a proof of a radical solution, something that can really solve it. And then, it has to be, paired with great technology at the core. So that's why Google has 50% engineers. A few examples, right, beyond Google search. Self-driving cars, it's now called Waymo. It was first called Google Car. It's 10x thinking. This project started more than 10 years ago. The first self-driving car is probably not going to happen before another 10 years. So that's 20 years of investment, but eventually it's going to rip off so many benefits. It's definitely worth the investment. Project Loon, providing internet in very remote places, also some crazy idea. And now it's actually being commercialized in across the world, especially Africa and South America. And then, moonshot thinking means accepting failure. There are so many projects that are created by Google inside the X factory that just are killed because we thought we had something, consumers didn't like it, or we couldn't find the right technology. We just kill it, and that's okay. You cannot promote a moonshot thinking culture inside your company and not accept that some of those projects are not going to work. Glass is this fantastic example. We launched Google Glass. Everybody thought it was the next big thing. It completely failed. It wasn't practical. People didn't like it. We pivoted it, and now it's actually a great item that we sell B2B. We sell to companies, for example, in warehouses, to be able to see where are the packages, etc. Glass is now an enterprise product. It's not a consumer product anymore. All right, I'll just wrap up with this last story about 10x thinking. 10x thinking can really come from anywhere. This photo here is of what we call Google Cardboard. And Google Cardboard is a $1 VR headset. It was created by 3 geeks in the Paris office. They were staying up late. They were working together, and they ordered pizza because they were working on a project. And while the pizza was coming, they read on the news that Facebook had acquired Oculus Rift, which is this VR headset, for I think it was $3 billion. And the pizza arrived, they ate the pizza, and then one of them was like, you know what? I think I could create a VR headset for $1 and make that $3 billion look ridiculous. And so they built this cardboard out of a pizza box. And it eventually turned into this headset, which we commercialized, and Project Daydream, which is our VR initiative at Google. So it all started in a shady evening, 3 guys, 3 Googlers eating pizza, and then coming up with a VR headset out of a cardboard for $1. And this is also 10x thinking. We have this incubator inside Google called Area 120. So just like you guys are going through Idea Space, our Idea Space inside Google is called Area 120. And it allows you to, if you have a great idea, you have 2 batches every year, and you can actually, for 6 months, fully work on that project if it's accepted by the incubator. And so this is a way for Google to institutionalize the idea of 10x thinking inside the company itself. So it's a corporate incubator. So it's our competitor to Idea Space. I'm just kidding, of course. It's nowhere a competitor. All right, I'm going to take a small break here and maybe take 1 or 2 questions, and then I'll just finish up for another 10 minutes, and then we have probably 15 minutes for questions. Okay, let me go back in time, still the same. Okay. Kevin from Urban Greens, does company culture play out differently in other countries you've been in compared to here? Great question, Kevin. Thank you very much for asking. The answer is yes. The answer is yes. Culture uh, is not only a company thing; it's also, of course, a country thing, right? The culture that was in if Google France or in Dublin, where I also worked, is very, very different from the culture here in Asia. However, the core principles are still the same. So the important of the mission and the important of the Google culture is that it should be universal, right? And that's why what I said, when we realized that TGIF was mostly US focused, Google eventually decided to change the format to make it more universally accepted by the rest of the company. So yes, the culture is very, very different. Um, However, there are principles that you want to keep, right? So you may have cultures, for example, where diversity is probably not as accepted yet as in the Western world. Well, you still have to be a key, you still have to make diversity, for example, a key part of your culture. In places like Japan, where women tend to have less access to corporate jobs, less access to manager jobs than, let's say, in the U.S., for instance. We've kept our company policy to have gender equality and diversity inside the team. So though this culture should be universal, but of course you will have flavors, let's say, based on the on the place you're in. For instance, in the Philippines, we have this very vibrant well-being group, because well-being and mental well-being is such an important topic for Filipinos. You don't have it in Singapore, for example, or not as much, because it's probably less of a cultural topic in Singapore. And that's okay, right? You let your employees take ownership of the culture and the mission. That's very important. If they don't have ownership and it's all top down, it's never going to work. However, there are some key principles you should always adhere to, and diversity is one of them. So yeah, great question, Kevin. Let your employees take ownership of the culture, keep it universal, but also stick to some very, very important underlying principles. Julius, how can we instill culture in a full remote working environment? Right, great question. This is actually something that we're asking ourselves at Google, so I'm not sure I have the answer. Um, However, a simple way to think at it, to look at it, is whatever you were doing before the crisis, or if you're creating your company now, think of the culture as in the culture that you would have in a normal environment, and just try to bring it online. So I was sharing some pictures of us doing TGIF over VC, over video call. That should still be a key part of your culture. If a key part of your culture is doing one-to-one with your reportees on a regular basis, well, keep doing it and do it online. I think maybe the best person I can tell you is, again, this great series by Business World, the one on Roland Ross. I think he talks about culture as well. So probably that would be most relevant given the context. So I'll share the article with Alex, and he can share it with you. Great question, Julius. Finally, how to create a good company culture online when employees are not motivated enough with their salary. Okay, well, thanks, Lex, for asking. Number one, if they're not motivated by their salary, that's a problem there, right? So you have to think about compensation in the right way. Second, we're also asking ourselves, how can we change the working environment post-COVID? And one of the things you may have seen is Facebook, for example, declaring that some of their employees can be recruited fully online and be fully virtual employees. This is also something we're looking at. But what we found over the years is that people like to be together, and bonds between people actually often happen physically. So you want to think very, very carefully about having a fully remote workforce. There are a lot of benefits of having people physically meeting each other, in terms of innovation, in terms of bonding, in terms of making sure your team is tight. So moving everything online, even post-COVID, it's something you have to look at very, very carefully. But if your question is around salary, you need to compensate your people well enough so that they're motivated to do your work. I know it's not something you do a lot in the Philippines. Salaries tend to be brought down by large corporations. That's probably not the way going forward. The most motivated employees have the right compensation to keep them motivated. And I'll speak about this in a second. All right, thank you. I see so many questions. These are all great. let me just finish up the presentation, then we can answer the last ones. Okay, great. Management, and this is going to answer maybe some of the questions that you highlighted there. Management was very important at Google from the start. And the reason why it was important is at the very start, the first few years of Google, the whole workforce were mainly engineers. There was no GBO because Google was not monetizing yet. And therefore, engineers at one point, they were like, okay, why do we need managers anyway? And the two founders, Larry and Sergey, they were like, yeah, that's a good question. Why do we need managers? So they decided to try and to do an experiment. They deleted all managers. All the engineers were reporting directly to the founders. And they gave it a shot. They were like, okay, let's give it a try. Maybe managers actually don't contribute to the company. What they found out, and they've named it afterwards what they call Project Oxygen, is that managers, good managers, are actually a key part of a great company. But it only happens if you are in the right environment. And the three key principles of management at Google are, number one, share everything. Number two, rely on data, not on people's opinion and management opinion. And finally, great managers actually don't exist. Great managers are actually great leaders. Now, share everything. Sharing and being very open and transparent with your employees is absolutely fundamental. I see very few companies where every employee has a shot at asking any questions they want at the founders. But this has been a key part of Google. This is what we call TGIF. Every Friday, the two founders answer questions from the audience. Now it's led by our CEO, Sundar Pichai. But for 20 years, these two guys were answering any questions from the audience. And they were sharing confidential projects, confidential numbers. It was a very open culture. Another picture from TGIF. It was fun. You can see Sergey with a Google Glass there. So the idea there is really allow anyone to ask any questions and also make it a fun environment. The second is rely on data, not on opinions. If you show data to your employees to justify a decision, they will be okay with it. If you just tell them, hey, this is my hunch, and this is how I believe things should be done, they will probably not all adhere. Every year at Google, we do what we call Google Geist. It's a survey sent to every single Googler, and they are being asked, do you trust your director? Do you trust your manager? Do you trust Google's leadership? Do you like Google's culture? Do you like the workplace? Do you like your salary? And then everyone, all those results are aggregated, and then every manager gets a list with how the team is feeling about those things. Super important to then make decisions. You can go to your employees and say, based on Google Guys, based on your opinion, you think, for example, that managers are not good enough. So let's look at a new program to improve managers. You said in the survey that your salary is not high enough. Let's look at either changing the salary, the compensation, the benefits, etc. So really trust data and base all of your decisions on data. To do that, of course, you have to collect data to begin with. Data is another part of our principles when we hire. When we hire at Google, we don't let the hiring manager make the decision. We rely on a hiring committee where the hiring manager is not part of. Why? Because if you let the hiring manager make hiring decisions, well, if he likes someone, if the candidate is the son of an important client, if it's the nephew of a colleague, if it's whatever, he might be tempted to hire that person, not based on the quality of the person, but based on who that person is. If you let a hiring committee decide that is completely independent from the team, they will just base their decision based on the feedback of every interviewer. And that is the right way to make hiring decisions at Google, is to let the decision be with the hiring committee based on the data of every interview. Then finally, managers are leaders. And this is the project I was telling you about, Project Oxygen, proving that managers don't matter, right? So that was when they deleted all managers. They actually do. Managers do matter when they are actually leaders. And the way to measure the performance of a manager is also to rely on data. So at Google, twice a year, there's a survey sent to every single employee, and they can rate anonymously their manager. They can say, is that person a good coach? Does that person micromanage, which is something that is completely contrary to Google's value? Is he productive and result-oriented? Does he help me with career development? Does he have a clear vision and strategy? So all those questions are asked to employees twice a year, and they can rate their own manager. Managers that have bad scores, they are either coached or, of course, they change roles and they go back to a non-manager position. What makes a team effective? When we did Project Oxygens, we found out that the teams that had a great manager and the teams that worked the best were teams that have 5 key elements. The first one is, these are teams where there is very high psychological safety, where people feel safe speaking up, bringing their problems. The effective teams are teams where there's high dependability. People can rely on each other and the trust is very high. These are teams where there's a high structure and clarity on who owns what are the different roles. If it's very messy, nobody knows who owns what, these are actually not effective teams. And then finally, the two that I love the most, the highly effective teams are teams that have a lot of meaning. They have meaning in their work and they can see the impact of their work. So, questions for you as founders. Do you allow your employees to see the impact that they're driving? Do they have meaning? Do they understand what they're doing, and does it mean a lot to them or not? Right? And most important, that's the most important one, psychological safety. Are they feeling safe? Can they speak up and not be grounded or punished for it? That's a very important question. And then finally, the last part of Google's culture, what we call Googliness. Googliness is very hard to define. It's a mix of passion, giving back, caring about the user. Hard to define, but I'm just going to share a few key elements there. If you've seen the movie The Internship, you may have seen a part of Googliness. Googliness is just being a nice person. So do no evil would probably fall into the Googliness part. Key part of Googliness is passion. And to measure passion, we have what we call the airport test. If I was to miss my plane with that employee, would I enjoy spending 3 hours of my time waiting with him for the next plane in the airport? Right? And a way to measure this is that person passionate about something? And not only passionate, but is he doing something for his passion or about his passion? I love mountaineering. I love hiking. And this is me climbing the highest peak in Europe, Mont Blanc. And, my manager, he loves salsa. And so he teaches salsa inside Google. Every single Googler you will meet will have a passion, and not only a passion, but also is doing something about that passion. So passion is definitely a key part of Googliness. Another part of Googliness is giving back. We have what we call the G2G program, Googler to Googler, allowing Googlers to teach other Googlers about what they know. And these could be work-related learnings or non-work-related learnings. Another part of Googliness is giving back. This is what we call Googlers Give. I think it's well done in the Philippines overall. So it's just giving back to the community. It's something that I believe most of your companies are already doing. And we also have our own version called Google Give. So it's giving to association, giving back to whatever Googlers care about and are passionate about. And then another part of Googliness is diversity. Diversity is just so important. Diversity of gender, of course, diversity of cultures, diversity of opinions, diversity of abilities. You have to be very, very mindful and make sure you assemble a team of diverse people, diverse opinions, and that you measure it. It's not just about, I hired this woman once, or, I hired this guy, who's not Filipino once. It should be measured. What percentage of your workforce is women? What percentage of your managers are people with disabilities? You have to measure and look at it with data. So diversity is very important as part of Google. All right, last slide, I believe. A few last tips for you guys as you're going into this fantastic journey of creating your startup. We've talked about giving meaning to your work and giving meaning to your employees' work. We've talked about trusting your people, right? Trust, psychological safety is just so important. An important one that many founders don't do: hire people that are better than you, smarter than you. There's this big problem in hiring where you always tend to hire someone that is slightly worse than you so that he or she would never threaten your job. That's wrong. You should always hire people that are much smarter than you, because that will benefit your company. Yes, you'll be challenged. Yes, maybe eventually you may have some scare about that person actually outsmarting you in some ways, but this will benefit your company. If there is trust and you're hiring smart people, there should be no problem inside your company. Two last ones. Pay unfairly. Pay unfairly means your best employees, they probably contribute a lot more than your average employees to your company. Reward them. Don't give them 20% increase versus the rest of the company. Give them a 200% increase. Make sure that your best talent is widely remunerated, because if you lose them, you're losing such a big part of your success. You have to reward your great employees greatly. And then finally, nudging. Nudging means sometimes you won't be able to change the behavior of people, but you can nudge them into changing that behavior. And I'll finish up with this story. When I first joined Google, 2014, we had just launched this new Android system called Android KitKat. And so we had a partnership with KitKat. And so all the offices across the world had thousands of KitKat bars in the micro kitchen. Now, the next Google guys came, and the feedback from people from Googlers was, we're getting fat. Our well-being went down. We're getting too chubby. And part of the reason was KitKats were just lying around everywhere. So people were actually not feeling as well as before. So the company decided to keep all those unhealthy snacks, because if you want an unhealthy snack, you go take it. But they would put them not in plain view like it was before, but they would put it in the last drawer of the cabinet of the micro kitchen. And so if you wanted to get a KitKat bar, you had to look under that last drawer. So do some kind of a crutch to go and reach out for them. And what happened was the consumption of KitKats and all those unhealthy bars completely dropped, and the well-being went up. So this is what nudging means. It means that sometimes you cannot change people's mindset. We're all humans. We see a KitKat bar, we tend to take it and eat it. But you can nudge, you can organize your workspace to really nudge people into changing their behavior. And that's the key part of how Google is thinking about its environment as well. So there you go. That's it for my presentation. I hope it was useful. Sorry, my AC just went off. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Sam.
Thank you, Sam.
I think the questions are coming in very quickly.
Yep.
You can take your pick.
Okay, all right. So let me see. Let me stop my screen share. I think I can.
Yep, we don't see your screen anymore. That's cool.
Oh, okay. You've taken out my screen. Great. I'll put on my video.
Awesome.
And let me go through a few of those questions.
Take your pick. There's a lot of them.
Let me go to the bottom. All right. Hi, Samuel. Starting from a software search engine company, Google has now expanded to hardware and AI, among other things. How does a company determine the right time to expand and discontinue product? Okay. Mark, great question. Is it only determined by revenue? In Google X, there's this principle where you must try and iterate as much as possible. So as soon as you have a prototype or a hunch, you give it a shot, right? You see how the market responds, and then you tweak the project. If after tweaking it, it doesn't work, you kill it. So being nimble means, don't create this entire big program and launch it and then realize that the market is actually not ready for it. Just try and iterate regularly. And that's a key principle of Google. So, you want to go into hardware? Well, how about you test? You create a prototype of a device, you go to market, you ask user feedback. If they like it, great. you just launch it in a small batch. If they don't like it, well, you try to change it. If they don't like it again, then you kill the project. And that's a very key component of Google X. There's a great blog post that I can share as well by the head of Google X. He's a fantastic guy. He wrote this Medium post where he explains the principles of Google X. One of them is killing things fast. If it doesn't work, or if it works but it's too expensive, for example, sometimes I think they tried this project where they wanted to take salt water and then turn it into drinking water yes, I believe that was the project. Anyways, they gave it a shot. They had the technology. It was just too expensive. Oh no, sorry, I remember. They wanted to turn water into gas, so create a fuel based out of water. I remember the project now. They had the technology. It was just too costly. They couldn't compete with the petrol industry, so they decided to kill it. So that's how you know which vertical to get into. You just give it a try. If it works, you expand. If it doesn't, you kill it. Right. So be nimble. Other question by Christian. If you have multiple 10x ideas that can help improve your product, is it better to launch it at once, or maybe a moonshot goal, like break those ideas improvement into a less, let us say, 5-year goal? I see. So Christian, I would just answer it the same way as I would answer Mark. A 10x idea, again, is not this big project that you launch, like you hide from the public, and then once you think you have it, you just go, right? A best way to do it is just, test the market, get user feedback all the time. The project car, the Google car project that I was telling you about, that's how we did it. We first launched a first prototype, asked user feedback, and then, okay, we change it, we pivot it, we partner with Toyota, we partner with other companies, right? So you constantly have to test your product with the market, because you don't know, the market knows, the user knows. If your company doesn't have a user first mindset, just like that first page of Google, you will not succeed. So you have to constantly test your ideas with users. So great question. Thank you, Christian. Does Google fire people? If yes, can I ask the percentage Google retain employees year on year? Great question. Session Groceries. I don't have the percentage. Yes, Google lets go of people. Most of the time it's accepted by both sides. If someone doesn't perform well at Google, of course, you don't fire them straight away. First, you coach them, right? The idea there is if you hire really well at the start, then you shouldn't have many issues down the line. If you have, you've still hired people that you can coach and train. So it's not, people look at firing, but they forget that, if you hire well, you shouldn't have to fire people. If they're not performing, if you've hired them well with the right mindset, they should be able to be coached. And I have plenty of stories in my mind of Googlers that were coached and ended up doing really, really well. Of course, if you need to let go of someone, well, it has to be discussed. And I don't know the percentage, but of course, the Google retained employees is the percentage is very, very high. So thank you, Session Groceries. Hire well. You shouldn't have to fire people so much. Let me go back. All right. How thick or thin is Google Employee Handbook or Code of Discipline, if there is even one? To be honest, I don't know, but I don't think there is one. However, the principles that I've just shared with you, that's the Google Employee Handbook, I would say. Joseph and Nina, we believe in a culture where the best ideas can come from anywhere and where people say it straight. Yes. The most junior team member can call out the CEO without fear of hesitation. How do you go about where people have the courage to act this way? Yeah, it's a really good question. Again, I think part of it is hiring, right? So part of Googliness is this ability of people to speak out. But the most important factor there is really creating a psychologically safe environment. People don't speak up because they don't believe that there will be no retaliation, or they don't believe that it will be valued. So you have to create this environment where psychological safety is at the very center. To create this, you have to lead by example. You would not believe how important is the behavior of a founder when you create a company. You can, of course, listen to plenty of podcasts from famous founders, like Steve Jobs or the founders of Airbnb or Dropbox or whatever. they will all tell you that people are always watching you. Your employees, because they see you as the leader of the company, they will always look at how you behave. So if you want to bring up an environment where people can just say it straight, you also have to act that way. And most importantly, you have to create a psychologically safe environment. All right, Butch is saying huge stock options, not just salary to motivate. Great one, Butch. By the way, all the questions are great. Alvin, drop down. Hi, Simon, I have a question, but it's kind of difficult to explain in typing. How can I ask through voice? Okay, I think I shared my email in the deck, or Alex, of course, can relay it to me. So, feel free to reach out to Alex or Diane, and they'll give me the.
I'm sure we can't get to all the questions today, but please keep dropping them on the chat, and we'll send over the questions to Sam, and hope he can get back to that.
All right, fantastic. I'll just take one more, and then I'll let the next presenter present.
Of course.
Thanks, Alvin. Let me look at it. Sam, considering people diverse, how do you harmonize sorry, I can't. There's so many questions. Work beat, there you go.
Those are okay.
How do you balance work need versus culture fit? Example, the team is overburdened and you need one more person. You have candidates, but they don't fit. But you really need a person now. How do we manage the trade-off? Great one. There is a very important compromise between, of course, hiring fast and hiring well. The way Google thinks, and by the way, I know we're a large company now, but that was one of the key principles at the very start, is that if you find someone great, hire them, even if you don't have a role for them straight away. In a startup culture where you're growing, there are changes all the time. If you find a great talent, bring them in, even if you don't have a role for them straight away. And the second tip is hire people in batches. It's much easier to onboard, a bunch of people together. They create what we call a Noogler group, or they start together. They create a lot of bonds. So 2 tips there. Hire in batches, and if you find a great talent, bring him in, even if you don't have a task or a mission straight away. I think that would actually solve part of your problem. If you have a reservoir of talent, it's much easier to fill a position than to fill it, in emergency. Don't compromise. I can guarantee you, don't compromise on hiring. The people inside your company make up your company. They make up your culture. I can't stress this enough. I've seen teams, even inside Google, where they hired too fast or they hired wrongly, and the team culture takes the hit straight away. And I know it's easy to say from the comfort of my chair, but I also run a team, and I also have to think about this regularly. If I find a great talent, I'll bring them in, even if I don't have a role. And second, I will never compromise on the quality of my hiring. I'll give you a personal story. I don't know if I can share this, but at one point I was interviewing for another team. Another team asked me to interview and to hire, or to give my opinion, on one of their candidates. And I didn't think the candidate was good. So I said, no hire. The hiring manager, and that's why I said, hiring committees are just so important, reached out to me and said, hey, what did you think? Give me your feedback. So I explained, and he said, well, is it like a strictly no hire, or is it just like, tending no hire, And I was like, well, I wasn't really sure at the time. It was early days in my career at Google. So I said, well, maybe no hire, maybe if you shoot a few other interviews, you may actually, find, more good size and bad side in that person. They ended up hiring that person. I felt bad. Even to this day, I feel bad. So, from that day on, I decided I will never compromise. And, recently, again, I interviewed someone for another team. I said no. I got on a call with 3 people from the team. They really wanted to hire that person. I was like, nope. These are the questions that I asked. These were the answers. I think these are subpar answers. My answer is no. And I didn't change. And that person ended up not getting hired. So if you build a system, right, you also have to trust the outcome of the system. If the system is you have a hiring committee and you get people from outside of your team to hire, so you get an outside opinion, then you must stick to it. And from that, again, first example on, I decided I will never compromise again, because I feel bad until this day. All right, thanks, Neil. Thank you very much. Last question, then I'm gone. What is Google's? I have a 12. Okay, 9 minutes. What is Google's best mistake? Oof, oh my God, so many. Uh, I think there's this great interview by Eric Schmidt who said the biggest mistake was to miss the social revolution. We launched Google Plus, but it was way too late, and it was, of course, a big failure, and we ended up closing it down. Yeah, I think we're not immune to missing out on the next big thing. However, if you're creating more next big things than you're missing, of course, it's a positive outcome. Yeah, I think we missed social. I'm not sure we're doing great right now, at least on the whole messaging thing. We had so many products, from Google Hangouts to Google Allo to Google Duo to Google Meet to Google Plus in the days. I think there's some consolidation there. We make mistakes all the time, but the worst thing you can do is to say, well, you made a mistake, you're bad. However, the best thing you can do is, okay, what did we get wrong there? How can we learn? And how can we get better next time? Is the right mindset. And I know it hurts. When you're a startup, you don't have a lot of leeway for mistakes. But the other side of the coin, which is don't allow people to innovate, try to minimize mistake, is also not a good option. Right? The best option you can have is to create an environment where people can innovate. You take on the risk, but the reward is, of course, much higher than the risk. All right, that's it for me, guys. Thank you so much for all your questions. I know I'm at time. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Diane, for organizing. I'm sorry I had to rush Diane's presentation. Diane, I hope you can share your stories with the team later on.
No,
no problem.
we have time for that later in the afternoon, actually. So thank you, Sam. Thank you for making time.
Thank you.
No problem. Guys, all the best. I'm glad you're getting into this journey. I'm also glad that Google is going to be part of it. Idea Space is part of our Google for Startup program. You should have access to so many cool resources. I know you have. And I can only wish you the best. I'll finish up with, I'm also part of an angel investor group in the Philippines called Maine. So I'm actually looking forward to seeing your startups pitch to us, and hopefully we can invest in some of you if you have great traction and a great team and a great solution for users. So thank you all.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you.
Sam. We really appreciate it.
Bye-bye. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye.